Well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to AWS Security Live, a show where we get to talk about all things security and solving some of those fun security challenges with our AWS partners. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ryan Orsi, and I run a team of partner specialists that are in charge of security, identity, cloud operations, resilience. Just means we get to have a lot of fun together with my other co-host, Mr.
Yeah, hey Ryan. Hey everyone. My name is Himanshu. I lead the team of our worldwide security specialists. We are a team of subject matter experts who help our customers and partners orchestrate all things for their security outcomes using partner tools as well as native AWS tools. Really excited to be here, especially after especially in the United States. It was a long weekend, given Memorial Day on Monday.
And I saw you got some sun there, Himanshu. Looked like you got out and stretched the legs a little
bit. Yeah. Pacific Northwest, pretty good for hiking and getting outdoors. So yes, I definitely got some steps in over the weekend.
Yes, well, that was my job. Steps, landscaping, steps. Speaking of step, we let our guests step into the show. We've got a special guest on for you folks today, Mr. Chuck Herrin from F5, our field CISO over there from one of our partners. Welcome on, Chuck, if you're there, sitting in the background. There he is.
Hey, here we are.
Hey, there he is, Chuck. Good to see you. By the way, amazing shirt. I have to commend you for the choice today.
No, thank you. It's one my Malaysian team got it for me, and I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, nice.
Well, I hope the weekend was nice and recharging for you, sir. And maybe just to start things off, you want to introduce yourself, what you do at F5 there, and then we can kick it off. I know today, I think we're talking attack surfaces.
We are, absolutely. So it's great to be here. Thanks, guys. My name's Chuck Herrin. I'm field CISO for F5. This is actually my first stint working for a vendor, sort of on the dark side, as we would say. About 25 years ago, I started as a penetration tester, and then I moved to the blue team at a little insurance company you may have heard of called AIG. Was there for about a dozen years, ended up running everything consumer facing from the security perspective. So 180 markets, 202 regulators, that kind of thing. Moved into banking and then started an API security company with some colleagues out of the Middle East. And then F5 acquired our company. So it's been a journey from an attacker to a defender to sort of an entrepreneur and now field CISO. So it's great to be here, and thanks for having me today.
Awesome. So you can play all sides of this game, Chuck.
Right. It does help to give one a pretty good BS detector, having the breadth of multiple roles over the years.
And Chuck, you mentioned, for our audience, by the way, wherever you're tuning in from, feel free to let us know. And, feel free to express, what was a fun activity you did over the weekend as well. We'll love to share that with the rest of the audience. Chuck, Ryan, used the word landscaping. And I think that was to me was sort of like a good analogy of, where and how I view F5 as a partner. Now, F5's been involved in, helping orchestrate, I would say, the internet or the networking capabilities for, customers. Where and how does this new role fit into the mix?
Into the landscape?
Yeah, what's interesting about go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
I was just saying where it fits into the security landscape.
Yeah.
You try it.
So F5 is a pretty interesting company. So most folks I think that are familiar with F5 know us primarily for application delivery and load balancing, and that makes a lot of sense because F5 invented load balancing back in the 90s. But in the same way that it turns out, let's say NVIDIA, for example, they started as a video game graphics rendering company, and if you're good at parallel processing, which your GPUs need for video game rendering, you can do all kinds of interesting things beyond that. Well, F5 actually started as a video game and virtual reality traffic optimization company. And it turns out if you can do layer 1 through layer 7 deep packet inspection and intelligent traffic routing, you can do all kinds of interesting things in the security and delivery space, well beyond virtual reality and video games. And so right now you can kind of think of F5 as your man in the middle. We're essentially a proxy company. We have 3 primary data planes: our distributed cloud platform, Nginx, which is the most popular web server and API gateway in the world, as well as the sort of legendary F5 big IP hardware appliances. And now we run those virtually as well. And so that gives us this lens into how companies publish their applications, how the applications perform, built-in fault tolerance, resiliency, performance, and of course, security.
Very cool. And you mentioned there were some elements in there where obviously availability and operationalization of applications is very important. But then I think comes the security element. Is this where sort of the API security elements come into play?
Yeah, 100%. So this is where I came to F5 is we built an API security company based on my experience in banking, building a digital bank in Dallas, and realized that the state of the art at the time was not sufficient to get my attack surface under control. So you can go right now and you can build an entire financial institution just with SaaS tools and APIs. And the challenge is that all of the normal governance that you would expect, so security types in the audience will be familiar with threat modeling, where you need to understand essentially assets, actors, interfaces, and actions. Who's doing what to what via what?
Well, how a bad actor may break in.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Who's in your space? What are they doing? What do they have access to? And then understanding what normal behavior looks like, so that you can then flag and alert on deviations from that normative baseline. Well, the challenge is if you don't know where all your interfaces are, if you don't know where you're exposing things, you literally can't govern, you can't monitor, you can't do any of these things. And APIs are very, very difficult to inventory, to keep up to date, to find, to govern, to understand how they're being changed, all of these things. So essentially what's happened over the last couple of decades is security teams and development teams have really never worked super well together. But they've gotten even further and further and further apart.
Well, calling APIs is so darn easy from your code.
Yeah, yes, sure. I mean, the rise in API first development and breaking out our applications from this monolithic to microservice based much more modular design, that was primarily done for speed, velocity, and that's the sort of theme that I keep seeing over and over again, is that most of the innovations over the last couple of decades have been driven by velocity, speed of delivering value. And security teams are having a very, very difficult time keeping up. And that's sort of core to the mission at F5. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we actually solve these root causes so that defenders can catch up and keep up with the pace of development, because the developers are never slowing down. Ever. The pace of changes is faster than it's ever been. So defenders have got to catch up and keep up if we're going to actually protect the assets that we're exposing through all these interfaces.
Oh, interesting. And by the way, we started saying attack surface. Your mind went straight to API. Give us like a broad brushstroke of major attack surfaces, even maybe from your perspective when you were running things in the financial services industry. Like API attack surface would be obviously one big major one you're calling out today. But what other large attack surfaces are there that you see a lot of change happening in? I mean, maybe API is the quickest, fastest changing, but what else do you see out there?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and it's one of the reasons why we publish a lot of research out of F5 Labs, and then we also work with and contribute to and consume research from others. The Verizon data breach reports and all of the industry reports. And we track the changes in attack surface, and it varies quite a bit by industry and region. So different industries have to worry about different sorts of attacks. Like bots, for example, we just published a great report on bot trends, and retail and entertainment have very different challenges than say insurance, right? Because of how do the attackers monetize what they're after. So however attackers can monetize your assets, whether it's scraping concert tickets or loyalty cards or frequent flyer miles or stealing intellectual property, your architecture drives your attack surface. And this is where a lot of defenders get behind, because they don't understand really their architecture. They don't understand how their systems work, how they've been engineered, how developers are changing things. So main attack surfaces we see, of course, the web property, the web attack surface. Email as a vector is still very popular. Trying to fool people, social engineering, phishing, info stealers. But then we also see a great deal of attacks against exposed interfaces from the mobile channel. Here's where you get really into the API, sort of attack surface. And the reason that these APIs are so popular is because they're super easy to use and they can transmit data back and forth really, really easily. Valuable to developers, valuable to consumers, valuable to attackers. That's the biggest challenge I think we see is attackers exploiting ways in that the defenders aren't even aware that necessarily exist. And APIs is a big, big problem in that space. We actually saw this year the majority of intrusions are facilitated by exposed interfaces as opposed to something like email, which has historically been, kind of the primary way in for ransomware and things.
That's a big data point, Chuck. And by the way, how would one inventory, or we use the term visibility in security a lot, right? You can't protect what you can't see, but how does one even inventory and get visibility of all the API calls being made in there, to external sources and also interfaces they've opened up in their own applications and systems for querying? Like how does one do that?
It's a harder problem than it sounds like. So the first generation of API security companies, starting in 2014, the very first API security company was founded in 2014. They started by analyzing traffic, so just monitoring traffic and then trying to understand, okay, of this traffic, which of these are API calls, where are they going? And what we learned over the years of trying to solve this problem is that traffic inspection lens is a really important lens, and it's an insufficient lens. This is where I come in and I say, like grandiose statements like you will never have a complete inventory just based on traffic. Well, and what we know is that that's actually true. The primary limitation is the traffic-based lens only shows you APIs and endpoints that are active during the period that you're monitoring them on interfaces where you know to look. Right. And so one of the more common issues that we see is like you'll have a v6/login endpoint, right? Or a v6/password reset. Chances are there's a v5 and a v4 and a v3, but most of those aren't actually used for day-to-day business. They're just exposed and listening. And so you're not going to see those, deprecated versions or other things unless you're actually hitting every version of every interface all the time. And you just don't. So we have to go further to the right and look and do active scanning and reconnaissance to the outside to find third-party APIs that maybe you're not hosting yourself. And then we actually at F5, we shift further left and do API discovery from source code. This is where, for the applications that your teams write, this is where you can actually see the APIs coming in or the endpoints exposed via code. And then we pull all those lenses together. This is actually the IP that F5 acquired when they bought my company, which was called Wib, is this fusion engine, taking these multiple lenses together and building a comprehensive inventory and doing it in real time so that it automatically updates. Then there are other lenses that we're bringing to bear as well, but there's no silver bullet. So, I lived in Dallas for a long time. And so you bring lots of lead bullets, right? Bring multiple lenses to this thing, because that's really the only way that we can understand what the actual attack surface is. Then we have things like how active is this interface? What data is coming across this interface? How are you authenticating? How are you managing authorization? All of those things become metadata about those interfaces that then we use to help guide security and DevOps teams to prioritize what to do about it. So you need to give you the context and answer the what, so what, now what question. That's the really hard part of this.
What, so what, now what? Should developers maintain backwards compatibility for more than 2 versions of an API, 6 versions of an API? I heard you say, right, this is very common, right? Development teams will rev an API and the old one's there for backwards compatibility because they don't want any issues with whatever it is, their end-to-end customer's product or software out there in the field, not being able to communicate back in if they haven't, updated the latest version on the other side. How important is backwards compatibility compared to just hardcore security controls and saying no?
Right. Well, it's a great question, and honestly, I don't have much of an opinion on whether it's appropriate, on whether it's good or bad to maintain backwards compatibility. My issue is to expose it on purpose. So if you want to expose versions 4, 5, 6 to the outside, and you're using those for business for various customers, or you want to try blue-green testing or routing different things, cool. I just want you to do it on purpose. So when we see like a version 3, and this is where the multi-lens approach provides value as well. If we see version 3 that's exposed, say we discover that via code, and then we're monitoring traffic and we see that we're not actually seeing any traffic going to this version 3 of this endpoint. And then we ping it from the outside and we confirm that, yes, it's actually, listening, it's actually responding. Then probably the correct response from the security team is to send a decom order to development teams, because it's active, it's listening, the data is exposed, but we're not using it for business, as opposed to, hey, go fix this vulnerability in version 3. Because if I'm a developer and I get that Jira ticket, I'm just going to close it because we're not even using that version.
Right.
Yeah.
And Chuck, I think you mentioned like I'm going back to my landscape analogy, Ryan. In the landscape now of technology, artificial intelligence, as we know, has been playing a big prevalent role. And, in the last few months, we've been talking about all things agents.
Yeah.
And how does that sort of like change the landscape now with APIs? What is the relationship between agents and APIs? I think it'll be good to like distill that, because ultimately, I think we all know it's like, software calls and API calls anyways. But where and how is AI shaping that landscape?
That's a wonderful question. It's a great question. So the way that I'm viewing this is we really have 4 drivers of the attack surface of today and tomorrow that we're focused on at F5. And the first one is sort of the app and API layer, the current attack surface. And generally speaking, what I'm seeing is that attack surface is not usually very well understood by companies and enterprises.
Now you said app and API is the first.
Yeah. So that's kind of the current attack surface today. So as we go to AI, all the things, and everybody is AIing all the things, right? Everybody's investing AI. Everybody's supply chain is investing AI in AI. IDC released a great report in November on API sprawl in the context of AI adoption, and what they're telling us is that when you invest in AI, you expand your API attack surface by roughly 5 times. So we have an attack surface that we don't generally understand very well. And then when you go and actually build, this is what we do with companies that are implementing their own AI or renting it from somewhere else or running an AI factory. We actually do load balancing and traffic management for the biggest AI factories in the world. Hundreds of thousands of GPUs, we manage that traffic. So we're all in the AI space. The challenge becomes that AI is APIs all the way down. Right. It's APIs usually from the front end. It's APIs for training. It's APIs for RAG, retrieval augmented generation, agentic AI, Himanshu, exactly to your point. It's all, and now with AI agents, now we have to think more about how do we discern AI agents from bots, and what's the difference from AI agents and bots, and bot defense and API security are hand in hand. They're absolutely two sides of the same coin. But I don't care how, I'm quoting a guy from Google here. I don't care how you're using AI. You're probably calling an endpoint, right? It's an API endpoint. And so the AI is expanding the attack surface and exposing new vulnerabilities that we didn't have to worry about before. So things like prompt injection, model unauthorized distillation. So now we have a broader attack surface and even new attacks that we need to think about.
And is our machine identities more of a factor in your thinking here of the increasing? Most people say the attack surface keeps increasing. I'll also say it too, just because technology constantly keeps moving ahead. But where in the olden days, maybe it was a end user like myself clicking, something or tapping something on my phone to interact with an application that then called APIs that were making those calls with my user identity, based off my human identity. Now we're kind of seeing things in workflows with agents in AI or agentic AI, starting large workflows of maybe finding the best priced airline ticket and just letting that workflow run. And it might be calling third-party data sources from different systems in different countries and different locations, depending on where the Team Orsi's family vacation might be happening this summer. You're never going to know. It's a big surprise. But yeah, when agents are calling agents and accessing data off of your system, and the human identity, I want to say, I think, is being outpaced by machine identities here. And I would think increasing that attack surface through the API attack surface 5x that machine identities are a large part of actually what's the user calls underneath are actually made by machines more so than humans. But feel free to correct me, Chuck. I'm just curious what you've seen out there.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. So when these agents, depending on the use cases, obviously companies are building for, but they need some level of access and some credentials in order to do the tasks that they're being asked to do. But the other interesting change is not only the identity management, which is material, but also the new protocols like MCP, Model Context Protocol, for example, is in current state not at all consistent with zero trust principles. So there's all kinds of ways that you can intercept and redirect these agents into potentially malicious destinations without your knowledge. You can change things after the fact and not necessarily know it and things like that. So it's a whole new set of challenges. The last thing that's really interesting is when we start using AI agents, the outputs aren't necessarily deterministic. Actually, they're far from it. You don't really know what the agents are going to do all the time. And that can lead into some interesting surprises too. So we don't have a ton of time today, but I was recently talking to a bank in Canada where they had a set of AI agents, essentially augmenting chatbots, and they wanted to do it for new account setups.
Right.
And what they figured out was eventually during the testing that these agents changed each other's permissions so that each of them could do the entire customer onboarding process from end to end, which violated the bank's segregation of duty and fraud controls.
Yeah, not very zero trusty.
Not what we wanted, but the AI agents figured out, well, they were looking at what they were rewarded by, which was speed, efficiency, completeness, and so forth. And they figured out, well, I could do this a lot faster if I didn't have these, bottlenecks. And so they increased each other's permissions and they could do the whole thing. These are the type of test cases we've never really had to think about before in application development. Applications thinking instead of just responding and doing things in a very deterministic way.
Did my eyes just deceive me? Did I just have a hallucination, or did we have it? Yes, there it is. I thought I was AI hallucinating, folks. But I think we have a question for Chuck from the audience. Himanshu is going to pronounce the user handle, and the question is: you can change the temperature maybe to 0, then it's deterministic.
I mean, sure. It's a little harder if you're renting somebody else's model.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say actually, like we were talking about foundational model security and like AI infrastructure security, and then we moved into agents, which again I think a lot of the times customers are talking about like prompt injections and some of the traditional ways of preventing or protecting agents, but I think now we're going into a little bit of a different landscape as these agents communicate on behalf or with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing is some of the attack patterns that we've been kind of warning about with respect to APIs for a couple of years are coming to pass. So the most expensive breach that I'm aware of was an API attack against one of the frontier models, and this is the what is alleged to have happened prior to the DeepSeek moment, which it was not a coincidence that the DeepSeek release back in January was on Inauguration Day. It was very clearly a geopolitical message, but that was what's alleged to have happened was API abuse. So fanning out with bots, multiple accounts, and then this feature of machine learning is if I can use your model and you're not, and this is where F5's defense in depth controls come into place with malicious user detection and rate limiting and things. If you don't control how I use your model, I can steal your model. Right. So I send you a bunch of inputs and then I get a bunch of outputs. Inputs and outputs together as training data. So I can either distill your model in an unauthorized way, which is what's alleged to have happened, or I can create a surrogate model and then start mounting white box attacks against that surrogate and then replay it against the original model. And those are usually effective. When that happened, when this alleged attack of all these bots distilling one of OpenAI's models made the news, it cost the U.S. economy $1 trillion off the S&P 500 that day. That's $1 trillion hack, and it happened via APIs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think as we go through, you mentioned Model Context Protocol (MCP) and Chuck and we started off the conversation from the network layer to all the way layer 3 to layer 7 application layer. Is there an opportunity here for the industry to talk about like agent to agent communication protocols, or protocols that help safeguard some of this communication?
Yes, absolutely. And the main thrust of what we're trying to do really is, the technology changes all the time, and it's always going to continue to change, but the fundamentals don't. We still need to know what you're exposing, where your data is going, what compliance requirements are relevant. Do you have geopolitical things that you need to be worried about with data residency, AI sovereignty, language support, all of these things. What F5 has been doing is we've been building not only our existing product stack, but also making a number of investments so that we can really do all things related to application delivery and security, including these new agentic AI agents and applications, which they're just the most modern of modern apps.
Yeah.
We still have basic, components, but it is different, but we still have to make sure that they're highly resilient, highly available, that we understand who's using them. We understand how the malicious actors are interacting with them and all of these things, right? We have to cover all these basics, and we have to do it in as much automation as we can so that we can move at speed.
And I love how you gave, like earlier in the show here, Chuck, and folks just dialed in, like the analogy Chuck gave about F5's product suite, sort of the friendly man in the middle. So, I mean, to give you a perspective of, they're able to, on your behalf, watch things. Visibility is starting point of everything in security. And we're just kind of walking through here. Right? I think it's pretty relevant of how like the world is moving into more of an AI powered world, but fundamentally we're still watching traffic, looking for authorized access, unauthorized access, exposure of things that might be intentional or unintentional, right? And putting policies, security policy or control policy to defend against that, protect against that, and continuously improve. Chuck, you mentioned in your intro, your background, your bio, you have a background being on the customer side of this and dealing with regulatory and compliance. I'm just curious, is there a regulation out there that catches your eye around security and AI security, or in any specific industry that seems to be sort of pioneering the most?
That's a really interesting and evolving space, and I'm not quite sure where we're all going to land. Like in the U.S., we just have now a new regulation making its way through that actually prohibits states from regulating AI. And in Europe, it's a very different scenario with regulations like DORA, which are relevant for hyperscalers and companies like F5, where they're saying, hey, be really careful on how much risk you put into one hyperscaler or one cloud provider. So the regulatory regimes are changing pretty dramatically by region. And most of our customers, like F5's customers, are the enterprise space, right? We're the top 15 largest banks, top 10 auto manufacturers. Very few of F5's customers operate in a single jurisdiction. Right. So this geopolitical flexibility and nimbleness, regardless of what actually the specifics of the regulation change, that's always something our customers have to deal with. And we do the best that we can to stay abreast of what's happening. And we actually provide a lot of feedback and guidance to regulators. At my speech at RSA, I just did a session on RSA. 80% of the follow-up questions to me coming up afterward came from the Federal Reserve, came from the regulators. The regulators are attending our sessions to understand what they need to be worried about, in the next 2 years. And so, for defenders, it's helpful to know what the regulators are asking so that, the first time you hear the question isn't during a field exam.
The security community is one gigantic sprawling family. We all like to help each other out for sure.
I'm assuming, the colors in the world map behind you, Chuck, are not representation of all these regulatory compliances.
Is that a botnet, concentration map? Oh shoot! You know what? We are coming right up on time here, Chuck. Before we cut you loose, we'd like to ask you a difficult journalistic question, such as, what did you do over the weekend? Any highlights?
So I was with family in an elder care situation. So not exactly how I wanted to spend the weekend, but it definitely puts things in perspective. And so we're working through that, and it's sort of the history of the world. So, everybody deals with that at some point, and that was the weekend.
Quality, honorable time, sir. And folks, if you didn't get the QR code before, rewind it on the on-demand. definitely check out F5 State of Application Security Strategy in 2025. Very, very cool report to check out. Himanshu and I, will be right back with more Security Live.
Thanks, Chuck.
Oh, I'm busted on the break. Oh boy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to AWS Security Live, our show that we get to talk about security and all those fun security challenges out there in the wild and solving some of them with our AWS partners. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ryan Orsi, leading a team here at AWS of partner specialists around security and identity and cloud operations and resilience. And I'm joined by my other co-host.
Hey everyone, my name is Himanshu. I lead the team of our worldwide security, identity, and governance specialists. We help customers as well as our partners orchestrate native AWS or partner tools for their security outcomes.
Right
we had a pretty lively show to kick off with one of our partners earlier, and I see like the audience members, were getting a little bit engaging or a little bit more engaging, and we apologize because of the time we ran up and there was a question. So we should continue that conversation straight in. And I think one of our listeners, Hridesh, had a question, which is first, with agentic systems now supporting agent-to-agent communication via protocols like Model Context Protocol, how do we envision enforcing security boundaries between agents to prevent unintended permission propagation? And I think I'm going to channel a little bit of Chuck here. I think Chuck mentioned like the basics don't change. And I think, the least privilege access management for what we've been doing for workforce identities, for consumer identities, will now apply to machine identities. And I think what we were talking about was the idea of zero trust frameworks propagating above and beyond just consumer and workforce identities into machine identities. So I think our next partner is also very well positioned to take on questions like this.
Oh, yes. I think we have Amy from Fortra. Hello, Amy. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Amy Zolla. I am with Fortra, and our goal is to help security teams stop attacks early and before they can escalate. So I am here to talk about offensive security. I did not jump into security originally. My background includes a criminal justice degree and a psychology degree. So some very varied interests I fell into.
That's perfect. That's perfect. You can get into the mind of the bad actors.
It's true.
Awesome. And Amy, you said the phrase offensive security.
That's
For
correct.
those that may be familiar, maybe not familiar, I know there's some other like related vocabulary terms like penetration testing or pen testing, red teaming, blue teaming. But for those that maybe just, if you can give us sort of like a picture on the canvas of someone in charge of security for a company, where does offensive security fit with application security and firewall and network and endpoint security? Where does offensive fit in?
Yeah, so when we're talking about security, we look a lot at our solutions that we have from vendors like Fortra or F5 or others, and we look at what we have in place to potentially prevent things from happening within your environment or, happening with your end users, because as we know, the human element is a component there. But with offensive security, we're acting proactively to test and see how those defenses actually withstand a potential bad actor.
And Oh, sorry, go ahead, Himanshu.
No, I was just going to say, I think like, I was wondering myself, being sometimes close to technology, these things become a little bit of a blur, like offensive security, I believe, like if I remember correctly, originated from the idea that is somebody who's trying to do or, pretend as a bad actor in lieu of helping uncover what are the areas that need to be fixed. Is that what I mean? I always were curious as well, like why the term offensive?
So, Hamachi, that's really accurate. That's what we do a lot with regards to penetration testing, some of our offensive security solutions that we allow, customers to purchase and then use so that they can do their own penetration testing or red teaming or social engineering to test their employees and see how security aware they are. So you're absolutely correct.
And give us a little bit of color too, Amy, on social engineering, penetration testing. Like, what is your team? I mean, there's a ton of activities. I'm sure you could go on, but like,
Yeah,
what are
absolutely.
some of like the major ones your team like typically always does for a company to give them? And I'm imagining the idea is engage with Fortra for offensive security, get some kind of a analysis or report to show them, where your human vulnerability or human procedural processes are sort of needing some leveling up, and where your technology, you also have technology gaps, I'm sure, that you uncover as well.
Absolutely. So my role within Fortra is overseeing one of our pen testing teams and our technical account management teams. With our penetration testing, our team members are actively going and speaking with customers. We have one size fits all services offerings, but we also have the ability to scope, which means we sit down with a customer and we ask them questions around what they have for solutions in place, what they're doing with their security posture, and how mature they are in terms of their security stack and their security posture. From there, we're able to look at, well, what could some gaps be that they might potentially have that we then need to go and assess. Oftentimes, we'll have an understanding of what they have in place for um, everything from their phishing to some of their network security. And then we can go and do some standard internal and external network penetration testing with cloud. That's a little bit different, right? The attack surface is different. We're looking for identity and access management policies that are overly permissive versus like maybe data being transmitted between systems. So that's a lot of what our teams will generally look at for a customer. It tends to get more specific as you look at industry and as you look at the different objectives that a customer may have based on their security maturity. And so some customers might be in finance and they say, hey, we want to know if someone can get to this specific database and get this information, right? Our key objective is PCI compliance, or hey, we have a SOC 2 compliance requirement that we need to work through. So we do have some general things that we do, but we will sit down and have discussions with the customer first and then provide recommendations on services and solutions to help them work through that.
Oh,
Very
awesome.
cool. Yeah. And Amy, you mentioned earlier, I think there was like pen testing, and then there was like red teaming and blue teaming. Is one different from the other, synonymous? I always assume like when you're doing application development or building apps or transforming apps in the cloud, pen testing involves a little bit more integrated analysis of like where all might be vulnerabilities or possibly like even code flaws, versus when you're looking at the broader infrastructure and how and where it can be penetrated or from malicious access, etc. Like in your day-to-day work, like how does those two things stack up?
So, when we talk about services related to penetration testing or any offensive security services, there could be a combination of the things that we work through. When you're looking at penetration testing versus red teaming is really this idea of can you get by all of these particular security controls very quietly and silently and not set off alerts, meaning,
Mhm.
do we need to do more, right? Whereas penetration testing, we often expect to hit some of those controls and still continue on with our testing, right? So it's two different approaches to testing. They both have their validity and their necessity, right? When you talk about red teaming, it gives us an opportunity to look at, could you maybe not be aware that something is happening within your organization? Whereas with penetration testing, we're looking at, are things working effectively?
Right. I think behavioral elements are a big part of this procedure as well, right? Most of the time, pen testing is looking at the tech stack, whereas when you do the teaming activities, you're putting in the people perspective along with the tech stack.
That
Who's clicking those links the most, Amy? Who's I want names. I want names.
it's the humans, right? So when we talk about red teaming, right, or penetration testing, there is this element of social engineering. There's this element of understanding the human being and what they're doing, and understanding the emotions that go with getting an email from somebody that looks exactly like your boss, or somebody higher in the company and going, "Oh my gosh, I have to get this done. I have to send them this information." We've seen some really interesting things happening, just in the United States recently, with folks getting emails saying, "Hey, provide us this information," and it probably shouldn't go outside that organization. So, where is this information going? Who's clicking on a link and then entering their credentials? And right, honestly, it is everybody, even if you are the greatest security expert in the world, right? It's just a matter of time before you hit something where you click a link accidentally, or you are polite and nice and you hold the door open for somebody and you let somebody in that you shouldn't. So.
Just Himanshu and I, we've never done it. Just for the record.
I don't know about that, but
I
I think
get it.
yeah, you bring up an interesting point earlier as well, which is the so what aspect. So like a lot of the security industries focused on detections, and we have a lot of different technologies that are out there that help detect things. But like all of this stuff that you're mentioning, which is in my view like sort of like people powered processes that need to go in. How does that sort of like then feed into improving some of that prevention and detection in the long run? And what is it that you see with customers, who might have multiple different security tools from multiple different, security vendors that are detecting things, and then also have these policy orchestration tools. So where does, partner like Fortra come into this play?
So, I think Ryan might have mentioned in the previous session that there is this aspect where everything continues to progress forward and we start to see a larger attack surface and perimeter. When you have a lot of different solutions and tools and a lot of different alerts, right? Every priority means no priority. And so, where Fortra comes into play is really acting as a vendor that can help you create a comprehensive view of what you have ongoing in your environment and pulling that all together. Everything from your services aspect of sitting down with my team, scoping, and then having us make very specific security recommendations, to things like having solutions that help within that stack to decrease some of that noise but allow you to see more of what's going on. We do have a solution called Core Impact, which allows you to do some of this testing on your own if you want to test your own capabilities, right? And so I think that's something that's great for teams that aren't necessarily sure where to start to get a little bit of an understanding in this area. And we do have a demo of that available as well.
Oh, demos are always wonderful. Yeah, I think our audience is very technical, and I'm assuming they'll love to see a demo of this in action.
Shall we do it? Roll.
We shall.
Is it roll tape anymore? It's not tape anymore, is it? I'm so I drove to a store to rent movies, folks. That's just that used to happen.
The first thing we're going to do is begin the Rapid Pen Test process, RPT for short, which covers the different phases in an automated way: information gathering, attack and penetration, local information gathering, privilege escalation, cleanup, and finally, reporting. Let's start with the information gathering step. To retrieve the host's information, you can use the embedded core impact tools or import the data from your own vulnerability scanner to confirm or dismiss detected vulnerabilities. During the test's execution, you will see the modules being run on the right and different levels of output down below. So let's click on Next. And let's wait until we have all the information related to the assets that are discovered. During this phase, you can see the discovered hosts as a list or as a network attack map, which give you much more intuitive graphical representation of the attack surface.
Oh man, the visualization at the end, I wanted to see more of that, Amy. That was great. Yeah,
that was opening up to be like a graph database or something.
Yes, so our tool Core Impact and many of our tools allow you to visualize what it is that you have in your environment, and this is just one really great way to start to get a handle on that. I don't think that there's any way to catalog every single gap that you have in your environment. I think that would be a challenge that we could not necessarily overcome just in terms of the speed at which we are moving today, especially as we see more happening with AI and tooling and scalability efforts. But again, this is just one way for you to work through that in your organization.
I think what you're all are doing, Amy, and your team is so valiant because, in my day job, dealing with AWS partners and building software, designing consulting advisory services, large digital transformation projects, the topic of security is always included. However, you start from different places depending on the people you're talking with, and a lot of them are in the business seat, are just looking for a concise, crisp sentence or two about what is going on with security in their company and how much they need to invest or what do they need to really focus on, what's the priority. And too much to Himanshu's point earlier in our talk track here, a lot of investment over the couple of decades we've been thinking about security, right, in modern times, has been in software and tools to defend or detect against, machine-based sort of traffic-based sort of attacks. This is the other side of that coin, right, Amy? It's the people in your company that probably have all good intentions. How are they utilizing these tools if they're in they're in a security function, or if they're not in a security function directly, but security is a part of everyone's job. I mean, that's what we do here at AWS. Security is everybody's responsibility here, no matter what your job is. But that's our culture, but not every company has that kind of culture. And I think what you're doing is just huge kudos. And also very curious. You mentioned, I want to talk about your social engineering. You said your background also had, you have degrees in psychology, graduated, right? And human behavior, and the topic of social engineering without getting you or your folks in trouble. What has happened? What's something so interesting that has happened when you're doing a social engineering, which is like a company hires you and your team to think like bad actors and socially engineer a way into the company's assets?
So I think when it comes to human beings, humans are the weak point in the chain of everything, right? We can set up tooling to adhere to rules and regulations. Again, with AI, there's complexities there where AI might go and do what it wants to do, right? But really, if you're working with a human being, if you ask nicely, oftentimes you will get a yes, right? If you're asking the right questions and you're doing it in a way that is appealing to that human, you will often get the answer of yes for whatever it is you're looking for. And for me, I think that's the most dangerous component of everything, especially when you have companies who, while they're focused on security, their business is customer service or their business is financial services. You have folks engaging with those people who are supposed to be worried about security day in and day out, who are asking the right questions to get that yes. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have learned in most of my engagements. There was one time where I just asked if I could take a picture of something and was allowed to do so. All I said was, hey, I can't really tell you why, but I'd like to take a picture of this. Is that okay? And they said, sure, right? So, and that was critical for completing the penetration testing services for that particular organization. So,
was that in person? I'm curious, Amy, if like you get more yeses face to face in person than you do on a virtual web call or an email or a chat message.
so that one was in person, right? And that's why I was taking a picture of it. When I have worked through virtual engagements with folks, I think there is a component where you still get yeses. It might be a little bit lower of a rate, but again, it depends on, have you understood what is driving that individual that you're working with? Do you understand what they're motivated by? Do you know how to get to that yes? So,
wow, fascinating.
And apart from the security aspects, Amy, I think like, a lot of the times we talk to customers and they struggle with the compliance aspect as well. Like, which is like, hey, once I have these security controls in place and policies in place, what about like, like being able to comply to a lot of these requirements or regulatory needs as well? Is that something that where your services play a part as well?
They absolutely do. I think it's very common for people to think, hey, we do security for the sake of security only, but we also do security for the sake of making sure that we are in compliance with regulations. There's many different compliance regulations that strongly suggest penetration testing services, whether in-house or externally. Externally would be engaging Fortra for services. Internally would be using one of our solutions like, Core Impact, Outflank, Cobalt Strike, to then be able to do your own red teaming or services as well. SOC 2 strongly suggests it. PCI, I believe, requires it, right? So any of the major compliance regulations that you're looking at, to some extent within the United States, are going to require this type of activity in regards to offensive security. And again, globally, this also is a standard for many different regulations. So
I see. And I think, so I'm going to bring up like a provocative topic here. This comes up quite often when we talk to especially security teams and, security engineering teams and the role artificial intelligence and AI is playing. Like, I'm sure, like, we foresee a world where there'll be an AI agent for pen testing. Like how, and how far would we go into that? Because I think the whole idea here is to have some knowledge-based human in the loop who can
humanoid robots with exoskeleton flesh delivering pizzas in person. Okay, maybe not.
No, I mean, I think the human aspects are all good. I'm more like envisioning where and how the role of a security operations and or a pen tester, like moves into that direction.
So I think AI presents its own security challenges that we
Sure.
actually need to be testing against. So that is a key component here as well. So I don't think we're necessarily going to completely replace any of our penetration testing services, offensive security solutions in the future with AI. I just don't think that's possible where we are today. I do think that we will continue to see progress with regards to tooling and scalability to allow us to move more effectively through our offensive security solutions and penetration testing services to test our own defenses. I see AI as an opportunity to create a more scalable offering for all of our customers with regards to what we're doing today. But again, that's sort of how Core Impact started, right? We said, well, we're doing all these manual things. Let's create a tool to then help us do that. So I actually don't think that's very far from what penetration testers or hackers have been doing in history.
So AI to help you all do your jobs, not so much the humanoid synthetic skin robots delivering pizzas to.
No, I don't think you're going to get as many yeses from like human beings to a humanoid robot. I just don't think that'll be as possible. And some of my most entertaining engagements, entertaining being interesting for me, have included that human element. So I do think we're going to be missing something if we go completely AI on this. So
I do align and agree with you there, Amy. And also that's true as your background always was, a straight line to cybersecurity all the way through. Human psychology, straight through. Hey, I'm just wondering, Amy, are your services, right, red teaming, offensive security, pen testing, is it for a certain size company, or is it for, say I've got a startup background myself. You all can look me up on social, right? But at the young startup companies, actually getting ahead of this would be really valuable, but maybe they're not quite thinking that's affordable or it's the right project for me to do right now based off of all this innovation I have to take care of, just building my product to get to the next investment round. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I don't think penetration testing services, I don't think offensive security solutions are exempt for anybody, right? Like I think that they're valuable for everybody in different ways. When we talk about the penetration testing services that we provide across our organization, or even the solutions that we have, we're looking at meeting the customer where they're at, right? What is it that you need from us, right? We do have packages that are sort of, one size fits all. Hey, you're not really sure what you're doing with your internal network. You're not really sure what you're doing with your cloud environments. Here's something we can offer you that allows us to test this and give you some recommendations, right? And just some basic standard testing, right? And then we have customers who are highly complex. They have complex hybrid environments. They have really very, I would say, sophisticated security postures and models of what they want to see in their environment. They have specific objectives, and we will sit down with them, and then we will have an in-depth conversation of what it is that they need to get done. So I honestly believe any size team, it can be really helpful, right? With your more sophisticated folks, they're going to get specific answers to specific questions. With your smaller teams in like a startup organization, you're going to get some recommendations that you can action on that will help you to be more secure by design.
Yeah, you're taking me back to memory lane. Just having that, just recommendations with relative priority based off of all of your knowledge and experience. Incredibly valuable. I mean, especially just speaking, from my own bias and kind of a background in startup companies, like that would be so important. And then of course you get the really well-trained, like seasoned security pros that need to know much more specifically, what exactly do I need to do with my incident response practice, people, tool, and process? What do I need to do there? Give me a road.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting, Amy. I know AWS offers like a security incident response service. I think one of the other elements that we see with that is most of the times I think customers don't even organize their teams in the right way, or there aren't like the right guardrails or permissions set in place to even do a simulation, something similar to that. Is that something that you help as well, which is like prepping in customers to get to that stage of executing a proper red team, blue team activity?
So we're actually working on developing some services to allow us to address those concerns for customers and to help teach them those things. It's not something that we offer today, but we're working through that because we do see that as a really valuable area for us to be able to provide expertise to customers who may need that. I would agree. I do see oftentimes teams that are not set up correctly to be able to handle incident response. And then also after that, after you've responded to that incident, what's the next step, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we just continuing to be reactive to that specific incident? Or are we moving forward to create plans for the future to prevent that situation as you move forward and to make sure that your teams are prepared? And so I do think that's a really valuable area for us to be focusing on. So, it is something that we're looking at to be able to deliver to our customers in the near future. It is something that if a customer engages us for pen testing services post incident or breach, that we are then able to do those services and then give them some recommendations just as part of that particular engagement.
Do you give them suggested run books to simulate a similar situation again in the future? Or, making someone prepared, in my humble opinion, is just give me exactly this email address has to send the email of this subject to that email address, or this system has to go online or offline. Like it's got to be very, very prescriptive, right? Is that what you inform the customer that's what they need to do?
So we're actually really a bit more in depth than that when we're giving information to customers. So it's not necessarily a general run book, but we're actually walking them through everything that we're found in their environment or with their, if we're doing social engineering, if we're doing phishing, or if we're doing smishing or anything like that, we're walking them through the specifics of what we're seeing and what they should be changing or fixing. So it's a lot more detailed than that. However, from that, they can derive what they need for their organization.
Oh, perfect. And Amy, it's been a pleasure having you here. But before we let you go, difficult question here. Prepare yourself. What was the last thing you ordered on Amazon.com?
Ooh, I would say that would be dog supplies. So I have 2 dogs that I love very, very much, and I'm fostering another. So we needed some additional training treats because, again, with a foster, new to the pack, had to work through that. So that was my last Amazon purchase.
Oh, those little furries get all our money. Totally.
They
I
do.
totally agree. Amy,
Awesome.
from Fortra, thank you so much for joining us, folks. We'll be back. We stream every other Tuesday, 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific, Security Live. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.